Well, shalom, friend. Today is day 41 of the 50 days of counting the Omer. Now, since Israel received the Ten Commandments on the day of Pentecost on Shavuot, in Exodus chapters 19 and 20, we're thinking about the Ten Commandments for these last 10 days as we count the Omer. Now, the Ten Commandments are actually listed in Exodus 20, and I'm going to make a distinction today that I did not make yesterday. In order to make that distinction, I need to explain to you that the Ten Commandments are divided up differently by Judaism, Catholicism, and Protestantism. All three religions find the Ten Commandments in the same passage of Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 17. We just divide the verses up differently. You know the chapters and the verse numbers were added by mankind. God simply spoke the word. He gave the Bible. And so God gave the Ten Commandments, and these religions are just dividing up the verses differently. So in Catholicism, the first of the Ten Commandments says, I'm the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods beside me. In Protestantism, the first commandment is, you shall have no other gods beside me. And in Judaism, the first commandment is, I am the Lord your God who has taken you out of the land of Egypt. So in Judaism, the first commandment really focuses on the deliverance from Egypt and Israel's distinction as a result of it. So let me revisit the first commandment for just a moment. At its simplest, in Judaism, the first commandment really requires faith. God says, I am God. I'm the one that brought you out of Egypt, and I require that you believe that. In our context, it would be as if God said, I am the God that sets you free from sin, and I require you to believe that. In Judaism, the second commandment is from Exodus chapter 20, verses 3 through 6, and that commandment forbids improper worship. So the first commandment requires that we believe in God, and frankly, we're required to believe in the God who brought us out of Egypt. But the second commandment basically says this: now that we have established that there is a God, I am He, and I have a great interest in how you worship me. Sometimes I like to say it like this. The first commandment says, don't worship other gods. And the second commandment warns us not to turn things into a God. For example, don't carve a piece of wood and call it God. Don't turn money into a God. Don't worship yourself. Don't worship happiness. Don't worship entitlement. But no matter how we divide up these 10 commandments, the first two are basically saying this: there's only one God, and He cares about how we worship Him because worship matters. So sometimes verse 3 is seen as part of the first commandment, and sometimes verse 3 is seen as part of the second commandment. I read verse 3 yesterday as though it were part of the first commandment because the majority of Christianity sees it that way. But I'm going to read it now as though it's part of the second commandment, which is where Judaism puts it. Have I confused you? Well, don't let it confuse you, because either way, verse 3 is part of the Ten Commandments. So in Judaism, the second commandment says this: you shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing mercy to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. So this second commandment says, no substitutes, even if it is a substitute or a stand-in for the real God. It actually says no carved images. What God is actually warning us to do is to not substitute anything for the real God, even if the thing is representing the real God in heaven. Listen to the way it actually says it: of any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. In other words, hell. God basically said, no substitutes, none at all. And then He throws in a reminder of His name when He says jealous. Now, He says, I'm a jealous God. He doesn't say that His name is jealous in the Ten Commandments, but He does say that His name is jealous a little bit later in Exodus chapter 34, verse 14, when He says, you shall worship no other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Friend, this is the reason that Judaism will not allow any statues in our places of worship. Not of Moses and not even of God himself. Judaism would see that as blatant idolatry. Now, idolatry has always been a challenge for God's people. Back in Numbers, chapter 21, God told Israel to make a bronze serpent, a snake, and whoever looked at it would be healed. Israel then turned that bronze serpent into an idol. And years later, Hezekiah had to destroy that serpent, that idol, in 2 Kings chapter 18, because even though God had used it, people turned it into an idol. Every generation has forms of idolatry that we need to overcome. Money, entitlement, happiness. Friend, there's only one real God, and he really wants us to approach him. So I hope that you will now join me in blessing the one true God. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us concerning the counting of the Omer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu as-sifarat ha'omer. And then we can count the Omer simply saying, today is 41 days, which is 5 weeks and 6 days of the Omer. Hayom echad ve'arbaim yom shehem hamisha shavuot v'shisha yamim le'omer. Today is 41 days, which is 5 weeks and 6 days of the Omer. God bless you, friend. I hope to see you tomorrow.